Adventurous kids explore with education and learning what a wild life is in the Everglades. I want to explore the Museum of Discovering Science. What plants do butterflies like? I want to know about Key West. Adventurous kids, learning and fun. Adventurous kids!
Today we are going to tell you
about Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law, also known as Finagle's Law or Sod's Law, is an adage or that is typically stated as, ready Mark, anything that can go
wrong will go wrong.
In some formulations, it is extended again, anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and at the worst possible time. For example, it's going to rain for part of the day. If it's supposed to rain on any given event, it likely will. I'll say in big question, what's the worst that could happen? A short circuit in a house, or the device is on, or basically this.
Another fun example is my gum. When I dangled it earlier, it fell apart and fell onto my phone. It's doing now, messing with my screen.
You know what I mean?
That's another prime example of Murphy's Law. And anything that can go wrong will go wrong.
At any given time, at the worst possible moment.
Yep, I just started chewing that gum and it's already falling apart. It's a good example of anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Especially that gum. Mathematician Augustus de Morgan wrote on June 23rd, 1866, the first experiment already illustrates the truth of the theory, well confirmed by the practice. Whatever can happen will happen. We make trials enough, later publications. Whatever can happen will happen. Occasionally, it's termed Murphy's Law, which raises the possibility if something went wrong that Murphy is a Morgan misremembered an option among others raised by Thornton on the American Dialect Society.
Society member Stephen Thornton has found a version of the law, yet generalized or bearing that in a report by Alf Holt at an 1870 meeting by an Indian society.
In 1948, humorist Paul Jennings coined the term essentialism, a jocular play on the resistance and existentialism, described seemingly spiteful behavior manifested by inanimate objects or objects that cause problems like lost keys, runaway bouncy ball, are said to exhibit a high degree of malice toward humans. In 1949, according to Robert A.J. Matthews, in a 1997 article in Scientific American, an origin of the name Murphy's Law, whereas the concept itself had already long since been known to humans, as quoted by Richard Rhodes. Matthews said, a familiar version of Murphy's Law is not quite 50 years old, but the essential idea behind it has been around for centuries. A modern version of Murphy's Law had its roots in the U.S. Air Force studies performed in 1949 on the effects of rapid deceleration on pilots. Matthews goes on to explain how Captain Edward A. Murphy was the epiom, but only because his original thought was modified subsequently into the now established form that is not exactly what he himself had said.
Differing recollections years later by various friends make it possible point who first coined the thing Murphy's Law. The law's name loosely stemmed from an attempt to use new devices developed by Edward A. Murphy. The phrase was coined in an adverse reaction to something Murphy said when his device failed to perform and was eventually cast in its present form. Prior to a press conference some months ago, the first effort of many given by John Stack, the U.S. Air Force Colonel and Flight Geo in the 19th.
From 1948 to 1949, that headed research project MX-981 at Mohawk Army Airfield, renamed Edwards Air Force Base, for the purpose of testing the human tolerance for G-forces during rapid deceleration. The tests used a rocket sled mounted on railroad tracks with a series of hydraulic brakes at the end. The initial tests used a humanoid crash test dummy strapped to a seat on the sled, but subsequently the tests were performed by staff. At the time, an Air Force captain. During the tests, questions were raised about the accuracy of the instrumentation used to measure the G-forces Captain Stapp was experiencing. Edward Murphy proposed using electronic strain gauges attached to the restraining clamps of Stapp's harness to measure the force exerted on them by his rapid deceleration. Murphy was engaged in supporting similar research using high-speed centrifuges to generate G-forces. Murphy's assistant wired a harness, and a trial was run using chimpanzees.
The name Murphy's Law was not immediately a story by Lee in the February 5 issue of Astounding Science Fiction referred to Riley's Law, which states that any scientific or engineering endeavor, anything that can go wrong, once again,
Will go
wrong.
Will go wrong.
Atomic Energy Commission Chairman Louis Strauss was quoted in the Chicago Daily Tribune on February 12, 1965, saying, "I hope it will be known as Strauss law. It could be stated about, like, if anything bad happened, it probably will."
According to Richard Dawkins, so-called laws like Murphy's Law and Sod's Law are nonsense because they require inanimate objects to have desires of their own, or else to react according to one's own desires. Dawkins points out that a certain class of events may occur all the time, but are only noticed when they become a nuisance. He gives as an example aircraft noise interfering with filming. Aircrafts are in the sky all the time, but are only taken note of when they cause a problem. And this is a form of confirmation bias, whereby investigators seek out evidence to confirm his already formed ideas, but does not look for evidence that can contradict them. Similarly, David Hand, emeritus professor of mathematics and senior research investigator at Imperial College London, points out that the law of truly large numbers, one should leave one to truly expect the kind of events predicted by Murphy's Law to occur occasionally. Selection bias will ensure that those ones are remembered, and the many times Murphy's Law was not true or forgotten.
From its initial public announcement, Murphy's Law spread various technical cultures connected to aerospace engineering. For long, variants that passed into the popular imagination, changing as they went. Author Sir Bloch has compiled a number of books full of corollaries to Murphy's Law and variations thereof. The first of these was wrong, and other reasons why things go wrong. If law, where the name is spelled back, is anything that can go right, will go right. The optimistic application of Murphy's Law.
Thank you so much for watching
This Adventurous Kids episode.
Yeah!
That's the B.
What did you learn today?
Adventurous Kids.
Adventurous Kids.
What was the most interesting fact?
Adventurous Kids.
Adventurous Kids.
Adventurous